everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today on the show, we have a very interesting and special guest, Kole Milner, who was quite famously arrested for growing mushrooms in Denver. And I believe this is the first podcast Kole has done, maybe. And first time we've recorded. We got to connect earlier in the spring for a few phone calls last year, and just connected a week or two ago. For whatever reason, Kole came into my mind as a great possible guest, in part given the celebrity Picard has received after getting out of jail. I thought this was, maximum security prison for LSD, as if he's the most dangerous person in the world. And, Kole, thankfully had a much less serious sentence, though certainly not much less serious of a situation on his hands. But we get into the whole story of the arrest, the prosecution, and what he's been up to since. So I think you'll like this one. A lot of lessons that we talk about regularly on the show get explained in a real deal, real life context. So yeah, we're not lying. You can get in trouble, people, and learn from Kole's situation what you can. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's it for the intro. Thank you for listening to this episode. Please share with friends, and we will start the interview on the other side of these ads. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today, I am joined by Kole Milner. Kole, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well.
Good. So, Kole, we had a conversation on the phone. I think I was in Nashville in maybe May or something, or March. It's funny how I can't remember a calendar. Anyway, we had a great conversation, and you were just down the road in Kansas City. And it was a fascinating amount of detail you shared with me about what happened. And it was such a compelling story that I figured we needed to get you on, and here we are. Yeah. So kind of help steer this a little bit. So the big story is that you were arrested for growing and possessing mushrooms. Is that right? In Denver?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was doing.
Yeah. And that happened shortly after the decriminalization initiative went through, right? So interesting timing. And as a result, you got a lot of headlines from what I remember.
Yeah, it was like 5 or 6 media stories.
Yeah. So I guess let's rewind the tape. So that happened, kind of living in Kansas City, doing your thing, working the system, all that. And let's kind of go back in time. Like what kind of got you interested in the space, or you okay talking about that kind of stuff?
Sure, yeah. If I can go back to like when it first entered my mind, like everything. I was kind of in a phase of a lot of personal development, just trying to essentially not be broke anymore. And, a lot of the studies I was doing was how to be like a leader in the cannabis space I was in the job I was doing, and the concept of having multiple streams of income. I was thinking, well, how can I get a second one going? One of the main things that stood out to me was from one of my favorite mentors, Jim Rohn, who says, you work full-time on your income and part-time on your fortune or your passion or your second income. And I was driven to pick something that I was passionate about, that was essentially a win-win. I provide some sort of value and I get paid for it. And I've thought about all the benefits I received from like psychedelics, mushrooms in particular, and how that would be a good thing to dedicate my time towards, to essentially maybe find there'd be somebody out there that could take mushrooms and, enjoy their life better. So I just dove into learning how to do that. I was all self-taught and started small and all that. And I noticed I'd hear at work, and eventually saw on like my Facebook feed that there was a campaign to decriminalize psilocybin in Denver, and then eventually seeing that there was a meeting about it, which I showed up to that. And after attending that, things kind of were quieting down. Didn't hear much about it because essentially they were either trying their first attempt at passing the literature to be approved, and I think it was the second time around it was actually approved. And I remember it was like 2018 in September. I went to the first meeting for the campaign of the petitioning training to essentially receive my, I'm not sure what they call it, like a ballot or a petition itself, like one specifically for me. And attended that and just sort of communicated with the organizers and just sort of hit the streets and was collecting signatures. And we did that for a while, from like the end of September all the way until like December or January, maybe even February. So we had like 3-4 months of collecting, and it was in the winter. So it was pretty cold out there, but I felt like it was worth it. So that's a little backstory there.
Yeah. And what kind of work were you doing, Kole?
I was in the cannabis industry working with a crew where we would have our services contracted to different cannabis grows, and we would just go in and process their cannabis how they wanted it done. So that's what I was doing for my living.
So meaning like trimming and or doing extraction, stuff like that?
I did everything from like harvesting, trimming. Some places we would package for them. So kind of a little bit of everything.
Okay. That's interesting. I never thought of that. That's a interesting angle. Okay, cool. And you know, we know a lot of mutual characters. Like I think the number one person that was kind of in charge of the Denver initiative, kind of in charge or definitely in charge. I don't know how to put it. Kevin Matthews was definitely a leader there. And there was a number of others, like the Denver Psychedelic Club had a big portion of activity there. And I met a number of kind of unaffiliated people, and it was always interesting to see who was involved. Just people from really all walks of life. It was kind of an interesting project. Now, so you were hitting the streets, getting signatures, your ballot and everything. And so you were, you know, not only meeting all the organizers, but yeah, like how did growing come in? Like, was it before, or how do you like to talk about that?
Yeah, it was before I'd even known about this campaign. If I could think back to the day, it was probably in 2017, and I like ordered everything in October and had my first harvest in December. And it was probably after December, like into 2018, when I first heard from people and saw on my Facebook feed about this thing. So it seemed kind of, I don't know, synchronistic in a way that I would get involved with the cultivating aspect to then see some sort of a legal opportunity to get involved in, to not only cultivate, but also help change the laws around it. Essentially activism.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And then what happened next? Was there some media stuff going on?
Well, essentially at the first petitioning training is when I met the people that you were just mentioning. And there really wasn't any media attention directed towards me until just before the petition counting started, which was essentially the beginning of May of 2019. And I think I'd done, I don't know, 2 or 3 interviews before May. And like, I'm sure you could
Mm-hmm.
search Google for my name or something, and you'll see the dates like of the time which the articles were released.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Those articles definitely are still there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done some searching, pre-sentencing and post-sentencing. So I've spent some time, searching or looking
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. And how did that go? You just brought him into your operation?
Denver Post, yes. Vice News, yes. Westward,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Harvest Public Media, yes. Essentially all of them, I suppose, except maybe one.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. That's interesting. Were they kind of like blown away when they saw it, or was it kind of like mixed results from everybody?
Yeah, I would agree. Mixed results, because there were even like some people that weren't media that I'd like brought in to sort of like show, this is how it's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And did you ever kind of catch wind that there was like a federal situation going for you, like a federal investigation of sorts, or was it like a surprise until they showed up?
Well, the attorney I had theories that there's potentially somebody in the campaign, like a volunteer that was like
Mm-hmm.
maybe an informant for Denver, I don't know, drug division, whatever you want to call it, because I don't think it was in the affidavit.
Why wouldn't there be?
I don't know. I think that's something that maybe other cities or states should also think about. Whether you're a volunteer or in leadership, is that to protect yourself and everybody, to at least assume that somebody could be an informant or law enforcement or something that is.
It's a shitty way to go about life, but it's true. Like I barely trust people because I know the consequences are so steep, or could be so steep, right?
Yeah, I think there's sort of a divide between thinking or knowing that there's consequences, but then the reality of like feeling and experiencing the consequences, they are kind of like totally different in how you process it.
Right, exactly. Like maybe there's risk here, but or is there imminent danger or something? Yeah, it's a big deal. And yeah, we could go into that kind of thing for hours, but maybe we won't. So, if you don't mind, like, could you explain how like the arrest played out?
Yeah. It was September 11th at 6:30 in the morning. And I kind of make a joke to myself, like, let's say like September 11th, never forget, referring to like the terrorist attacks. And I felt like this is like a different kind of never forget for like my world. But yeah, it was pretty normal. Like I woke up in my sort of mushroom grow was in a fruiting phase. So I would, oxygenate and get my breakfast ready and head out the door. And essentially I was walking down the hallway, making a right. There's an entryway, two elevators and a stairs. And there's two gentlemen standing there. And I didn't think much of it, but then they're like, "Hey, is your name Kole Milner?" I'm just like, yeah. And
Oh boy.
this essentially, I was just like standing there, and they're like, "Well, we know what's going on. We've got a search warrant." And from behind me, there was like another, I don't know, agent who came out of like the storage / washer and dryer area. And it's kind of that point it clicked, like, I'm surrounded, like, I'm not going anywhere. And kind of a lot of things like came to me, like not just what I was thinking, but I was feeling. I'd say the fear was pretty palpable, just extremely loud. It's like the fear, thinking, am I going to jail? Am I being arrested? What's going to happen to my dog? What's going to happen to all my stuff? What am I going to tell my family? So it's like everything sort of rushing in. And I remember I was sort of like getting lightheaded, maybe like tunnel vision. And I felt myself sort of like stumbling in a way. And they interpreted that as like I was going to try to run. So they're like, hey, just stay right here. I was like, no, guys, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just like, I'm fucked up right now. And they're like asking me a bunch of questions and like put me in handcuffs, I think, and sort of brought me, the three of them, back over into the storage laundry area. And I could see out that entryway other sort of like agents, whatever their role was, sort of coming in. I don't know if it was first, but there was like a guy all tacked out in military gear with an AR-15 coming in. I remember one of the things they told me was, hey, look, we're choosing to do it this way. We could have like kicked down your door and all that, but we don't think we need to do that. And they asked me about my dog, because in the affidavit, it shows that they were like, I don't know, casing my place, like checking out the activity, and they would see that I'd go out with my dog. So that's how they knew I had a dog. And they actually allowed me to open my door and like put my dog in his cage. And that's when we were in the storage laundry area. And that's when I saw everybody sort of coming in, and saw like plainclothes, bulletproof vest agents like coming in, like, and two guys in like hazmat suits. And
Right.
I'm sort of asking the two agents questions like, hey, I get you guys are like trying to play it cool, maybe so that I'll play it cool, but I understand the situation is not cool. So what's about to happen? And they're saying, well, we're going to take whatever's on the search warrant. And I said, well, what are these charges are going to look like? Like, what am I sort of facing? And they asked me, well, do you have a record or anything? I said, no. And then they kind of said casually, like, oh, you'll probably just get probation. And I remember one time while standing in sort of the storage laundry area, they said, maybe not they, but one of them said, look, we don't give a shit that you're growing mushrooms. You just can't go around saying you're not scared of the police. So
that's wild.
I don't really remember saying that, but I remember it was in one of the articles. It said something like, mushroom cultivators not scared of the police, which you can't quote me saying, but they put that. And I could tell that they were saying that to me based on what was in the articles. And eventually we went from the laundry area back into my place, and they actually took the handcuffs off me. And the agent guy kind of made a joke like, you're not going to start swinging if I take these off, are you? And I'm getting sort of the impression that it's just another day on the job for them. But it's, sort of a life-altering moment for me, sort of like a weird disconnect there. So they took them off and we went inside, and I'm essentially sitting on my couch while they're sort of looking through, I guess, everything, like lifting my couch and looking under and around that. And there's like an AC unit in the corner. They're sort of lifting the panel off of it and looking through my kitchen, and this, I don't know, essentially looking for anything pertaining to the search warrant, I assume. And sitting there on the couch, I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, is this really happening? Like, just kind of seeing the worst thing sort of happening before me, sort of taking it all in. And I remember like one of the agents sort of sitting at my computer desk chair, and he's got like paper where they're listing the things that they're seizing. And I remember him making a comment
Mm.
saying, "Oh, well, I've never had the guy sitting down in the room while we're doing this." So maybe
Mm.
it was uncommon for them to just let me sit there like not handcuffed, observing. That's the impression I got. And they
Mm.
started bringing the tubs from my room into the living room. And they laid out like a tarp and just started picking the mushrooms out of the tubs and laying them out on the tarp. And eventually you'll see that they counted them all and weighed them all. And of course, they don't weigh the dry ones separate from the wet ones. It's just all thrown together when they weigh it.
They did not weigh your substrate or anything like that. You
No,
know, I heard they do that in cannabis grows regularly, weighing soil. But okay, that's good to know.
I mean, it's possible that when they picked them, there was like substrate attached to the ends of the mushrooms, but not the whole
Mm-hmm.
like cake. And there's
Yeah.
some other weird comments. Like whenever they're bringing out the tubs, one of the two initial guys I met was carrying one out, and he's like, "Wow, Cole, there's a really big one in here." Again, the mentality of, "Oh, this is just another day on the job," like making jokes.
Right.
And they asked, "Hey, is there anything toxic in here that we should know about?" And I've read or seen on YouTube other like mushroom bust stories where they say things like
Mm-hmm.
toxic spores or things like that. And it just shows a lack of understanding or knowledge or like ignorance of like what psychedelic mushrooms are, that they wouldn't even grow if it were toxic. You need completely clean, sterile environments, which they just weren't aware of or knowledgeable of, which is par for the case in other drug bust related things. Like I just read a Facebook post from some sort of police agency posting that they seized a bunch of edibles and that it's common for people to overdose on edibles. So you just see a lot of ignorance or misinformation or lack of understanding when it comes to um, drugs in general in
Yeah.
2022.
Ugh. Yeah. You know, it stinks, right? All the information's there, but I guess to their defense, they're not exactly biologists or mycologists by any stretch. But it does suck though. Absolutely.
Maybe I can sort of wrap up the raid thing.
Sure. Yeah.
They pick all the mushrooms and they take all the tubs, and then they're sort of leaving. They took my phone and my computer.
Mm.
And I'm kind of thinking, well, I need to call my boss. I need to call people that are close to me. So I had essentially left in my car while the tubs were still out next to their black Toyota 4Runner. I noticed that's a
Mm.
vehicle they were in. So whenever I notice them on the street now, I'm like, "Yep, that's the car." I was outside my
Oh,
place,
wow.
so I had left to go to Sprint where I had my service, and I just got a new phone, changed my phone number, and I remember sort of
So you didn't get arrested. It was a raid and you were able to drive away.
walk away, drive away, yeah.
Wow.
And like 2, 3 weeks later, those same two first agents I saw, they came and dropped my phone back off. And I thought it was interesting. They never gave me back my computer until after sentencing, because
Hmm.
my phone had basically everything on it, but my computer was relatively new. And I only used it to like order nutrients, and I didn't really have anything else on it. So I'm just curious why they didn't give that back when it had the least bit of information on it.
Right. Hmm.
but I got it back now. My attorney got it and shipped it out to me. I had to pay like $100 to get my computer back, but it's sitting in my closet in its original box that it was sent to me in.
Wow. How long did it take for them to return the phone? You said a week?
2 weeks, I think.
2 weeks. And you didn't move right away. You were staying in your same
home?
I
just stayed in my same place.
Okay.
And that was in September, and my lease was up in March, so I stayed there till March 2020.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. And then when did you start hearing from courts or agents after that about how the process was going to go? Like, did you get a lawyer and that was kind of mediating it for you?
Yeah, it was probably that week or that day. I was sort of inquiring about attorneys, like which attorney should I get? And I'd talked to maybe one or two, but I had a friend in the community that said, "Hey, my friend was just dealing with possession charges. This is the attorney he had." And I sort of consulted with that attorney and met with her. And I suppose I just liked her attitude and the experience she had. So that's who I went with. And I probably decided that within the first week because I felt like it was important to do that. And it also probably made me look good or better that I'm doing what I have to do given the circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. It's fascinating they kind of were able to tell you what your sentence might be. I'm sure they were just speculating, but these agents, these DEA guys have done this plenty of times, right?
I suppose so. I mean, I don't think they're lawyers, but maybe they've heard from other people or in that realm.
Right. They've probably had other cases that, they saw the result or tracked or something.
In the affidavit or the initial charges, I'm probably not going to remember all of them, but one of them was like conspiracy, that maybe I was working with other people, which I wasn't. The other one was, I don't know if it was laundering, but they had like information from my Facebook that I was trading Bitcoin. So they were maybe trying to look at evidence to see if I was taking money I was making and hiding it in cryptocurrencies, which I wasn't. I only had like $800 in Bitcoin at the time. And I really wasn't making insane amounts of money. It was like in the articles, it says 1 or 2,000 a month. So I'll just stick with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild how they can kind of project these grand visions on us at times, or on people like, our targets. It's awkward. Ah, man. Wish I took that one down. Oh, I was kind of curious, like, do you have anything you'd like to mention on like genetics or strains or spores versus local culture or anything like that? We don't need to get technical or anything, but just like what were you growing?
They were cubensis, the mushroom variety.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it. I had like 7 different varieties of cubensis.
Do you remember some of the strain names?
Golden Teachers, B+, Albino A+, Penis Envy, Cambodia, Mazatec, Hawaiian. I think that's it. 7.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, and for people who don't know, there's like one of the terms might be cultivar or strain, variant, variety. There's so many different ways of talking about that, but it's a fascinating topic nonetheless. Cool. And we're not getting into how to do it here, but what method did you use typically?
I suppose you could call it the tray method, bulk substrate, tray method in the
right on.
monotubs.
Right on. Great. Yeah. And then how did things play out? Was it like multiple court appearances for you or kind of one time go?
So since I had my attorney, she was in communication with, it was this guy named Connor from the,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, DA, I think. So she was
Okay.
communicating with him most of the time in place of me, and I hadn't gone to any court appearances
Mm-hmm.
just because they were in the process of building the case based on the initial charges. And
Mm.
through her communicating with them, we got like a plea deal. And, during that time between them building their case and the plea deal, the stress was kind of in my mind just hearing like the minimum sentencing guidelines, 6 to 10 or 20 years. So you'll
Mm-hmm.
kind of run a train on yourself just sort of thinking about that, maybe envisioning like the worst happening, hoping for the best happening. And when we get around to like the plea deal, it sounds a lot better, but it still sucks. It was essentially a recommended 6 months in prison. And I think it could have been more than that. But there was also what was called like a variance that we had, essentially where
Mm-hmm.
we could argue or present a case that Kole doesn't deserve to spend this time because of XYZ. And it
Mm-hmm.
essentially left it up to the judge to sort of decide whether to do 6 months or more or probation, which part of our variance was that I should just have probation.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when like the pandemic kicked off and court federally, locally was slowed way down. And there was actually
Mm-hmm.
one or two times where we were pushing, we want to meet in person. We don't want to do sentencing online or through video. And this was something my attorney was
Mm-hmm.
recommending. She says, like, I recommend we do it in person because it'll make you look better, XYZ. And it got to about the third time where the court date was scheduled. And we had this conversation of, well, should we wait another third time? To which she said, Kole, I don't know if there is going to be in person court. I think that
Mm.
we should just do the video, Zoom, whatever you want to call it, court, because it doesn't hurt us or benefit us to not do it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of just took her professional advice and we had it scheduled for February 1st or 2nd. So that's when it was, that's when the sentencing happened. So I had a
Right
video
on.
court and I had like something I had written out, what I wanted to say, which was curated by my attorney and I to just say what I needed to say, essentially. And for the most part, I meant it. I remember like the last things I said was, I shouldn't have done any of it. Mushrooms are still illegal and I'm not a doctor. Essentially, I don't have the qualifications to sell a psychoactive thing or think that I know what benefits they have and such, just sort of saying that. And
Mm.
I remember the judge was saying, the world is kind of out of touch with sentencing guidelines on matters such as this. I know that the DA or whoever's pressing the charges is recommending 6 months, but 6 months in prison is hell, essentially is what he said. And having a felony on your record is worse enough or bad enough. I think that we should do probation. And that's kind of how it went. And I was very relieved. Very
Mm.
grateful for that, all things considered.
Yeah, that's wild. That whole process is incredibly complicated and scary, really. I think I mentioned that I had a friend that got arrested up here, and it looked like he was going to do a lot of time for just mushroom selling, not cultivation. And the judge and the DA actually went to the back room and looked up things about mushrooms, and it was kind of fascinating. The judge and the DA said, "Well, these actually don't really fit with the same kind of criteria we look at when we look at sentencing people for cocaine offenses or anything like that." And they actually decided to give a really light sentence. I think he did 4 days total plus probation, or 4 to 6 days total. Kind of incredible. And it sounds like you had somewhat similar luck, if you want to call it luck.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's incredible that you had, you went through all this, and you thank God didn't have to do any time.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it was stressful on its own. I mean, being in jail or prison is a whole nother level of stressful. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, all things considered, it worked out well for me. But also, I did everything I was supposed to. Part of
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the main reason, but part of moving out here during that was
Mm-hmm.
just to sort of get out of Denver because of the pandemic. And I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm just going to go live with my family. It also looked good for my case that I was in a pro
Mm-hmm.
social environment and disconnected from influences in Denver. And I'm working in the family business. And essentially, I I wasn't really doing something that created victims or hurt people. But the whole idea to make it sound like I'm leaving this environment where I was doing this, I wasn't hurting people. My efforts through activism and cultivating was to help people and myself. So it's weird to say that I'm in a pro-social environment when I already was in one. I was around good people and I was doing the right things, and I was working a full-time job, and nothing about my life was criminal in the sense that they're victims
Right.
from my actions. So it's just very weird how it was all framed just based on just because of what the law is. Very
Mm-hmm.
weird.
Right. And, given the recent developments in psilocybin, it's going to be increasingly frustrating for you. Clinical trials, expanded access in Canada, and all this stuff. Yeah. I don't know. Have you thought, well, of course you have, but anything you want to share about like how you were sentenced before all this kind of really wild business and clinical news has kind of hit the papers and everything?
I know that Denver having their initiative and their campaign be successful sort of sparked all these other cities or counties or states initiating their own decriminalization or legal reform regarding entheogens and psychedelics. I'll just say I'm not surprised. I could imagine it
Mm-hmm.
going in that direction. I think it's good. I think it should continue as far as people having access to medicines that benefit their lives in many different ways. I think to deny people that choice or that access is inhumane, is not the right thing to do, is immoral, but that's not necessarily what the law is meant to do. What is moral, what is right or just, it just is what it is. It's man's law, which you're going to be saying to yourself a lot like, this isn't supposed to make sense. It just is what it is. And in this context, it creates victims in a lot of ways through the drug war, especially with entheogens.
We talked about this idea a little bit when we were chatting. I think it was last week, and I'd love for you to expand a little bit on this concept of law not necessarily making sense. or man's law, as you said. I think it's an important discussion.
And kind of delving into philosophy in a way, or what's ethical, or getting into
Right.
principles.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not.
Ethics is endlessly complicated.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I'm not really an expert on the matter. I've got like my own experience clearly, and maybe my opinion, but you don't necessarily have to be an expert or have a lot of experience in the matter to just look at something and see, well, what is the effect, or to know what right and wrong is. You know, you can trust yourself a lot of the time when it just comes to seeing what are the results, what are the effects, and was harm done or was harm not done. And especially with the war on drugs, I understand that there are mind altering substances or drugs that are harmful to the body, maybe like cocaine or meth or heroin. Some people would say, oh, well, there are medical ways to use them. There are ways to not abuse them. And for some part of that, I would agree that people can use substances recreationally or not abuse them. But, that's not everybody. People are going to abuse substances. People are going to abuse anything, whether it's legal or illegal. That's just sort of the human condition. We can see that people abuse things, each other, substances, the law, or exploit. So I think that's one thing you can't get away from. But I think our ability to mitigate or turn away from things that are harming people, more in particular, people that are just seeking out medicines of the mind in order to live a better life. And you can kind of see there's like a medical model arising for a psychedelic assisted therapy, where I think if that is available to people, it's going to make a big difference in society or people's performance. And it's going to be a net positive to have more sane, healthy, well-adjusted, emotionally healed people in society, in the workforce, in relationships. So legal reform should happen just from a human beneficial standpoint. And of course, allow access to information for people to make educated decisions in either seeking an avenue to heal themselves or go the medical sort of therapist route. I think it's nice if that's all available. Less victims, more human prosperity in general.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. The war on drugs has had an incredible amount of harm on populations. Disproportionate sentencing for people of color is just insane to me. And it seems to be no end in sight there, even. And this stuff does impact families for generations if people go to jail. So it's a really sad state of affairs. And if you're paying taxes in America, you help fund this whole project. So it's something that you should work towards voting against. And even if somebody's doing a drug you don't necessarily agree with, maybe they shouldn't necessarily have to go to jail, right? Maybe they should have the option of rehab instead if they want it.
Yes.
So it's a really complicated, nuanced issue, but a big one and an important one to discuss.
Yeah. The more we discuss it, the more we combat ignorance in the world. And one thing that I agree with and that I've heard is other people's ignorance affects your freedom. And I think that's completely true, whether it's social, political, legally. Yeah, ignorance definitely harms everyone.
Exactly. So that's why I'm really thankful you came on to share your story. I see so many people out there taking a lot of risks, and it really kind of freaks me out because they're kind of pretending like there's no consequences. And, I get some of the thinking, but I also disagree with plenty of the thinking, because people just sometimes, what was the term? Lost in the sauce. Like people definitely can get a little confused if they're using too regularly or just like in it all the time, right?
Could you repeat that last part?
People get a little lost morally, or not even morally, just safety wise. If you get too deep into the psychedelic scene,
Right.
and are using all the time, things can, you start having all these thoughts like, oh, the universe will protect me because I'm doing what's right.
Yes.
And, that's kind of funny thinking to me, because like, how many historical examples do we have of that not playing out that way?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. That's just my thinking here. I just urge caution.
Yeah. I would also encourage whoever's in the psychedelic space to use caution, because back to what you said, being lost in the sauce. You could be on the outside looking in and just go, hey, Cole, do you think that the more of these interviews you do, it's going to draw more attention to yourself and increase the likelihood of getting caught up with charges? And
Mm-hmm.
I probably would say, yeah, that makes sense. But I suppose I had the mindset of like, well, why would it happen to me? Because I'm not doing anything crazy. What I was doing wasn't just for me. It was for the next person's benefit, the person really struggling who doesn't know what to do, struggling from trauma or mental illness or addiction. I was definitely thinking about that person. Not that I
Mm-hmm.
have really much trauma or struggles mentally or emotionally, but I know that I have empathy, in that if this is a medicine that can be decriminalized or the law being reformed, it'll invite them to seek out that healing or that treatment. So I just felt good about what I was doing, to the point where my judgment was clouded. I didn't think it could happen to me, which is why I was just sort of saying whatever I was saying, and sort of having this uh, mentality of giving the journalists like the benefit of the doubt, that they are going to keep me anonymous, that they're not going to put out anything about my identity out there. And specifically the interview with the Westward on underground mushroom dealing, I was sort of letting the journalist get like a idea of like the whole thing, and then they curate it in a making me anonymous fashion. And I don't think that everybody in the psychedelic community or scene is going to put themselves out there the way I did. But also, I wasn't asking for the interviews. I wasn't searching for them. They were presented to me by a leader in the community. And from the point of me starting cultivating, to the campaign being a thing, to joining it, to doing everything I did, it just felt like I was in the right place. I was doing what I was passionate about. I felt like it was all happening for me. It was sort of given to me for a reason. Like, this opportunity is here for a reason, because you're here and because of your involvement. So of course I wanted to take part in it and say yes. And again, my judgment being clouded from the consequences. And like I said before, the idea that it is illegal and that there are consequences is sort of separate from actually having consequences and having all that happen to you and thinking that you're going to be going to prison. They're two totally different animals. And I suppose if you're going to learn from other people's experiences, learn from mine and do not be public with your activism, because you never know. You never know what could happen. You might not be as lucky as me or your friend that you were talking about. You might have other criminal or things on your record that if you get caught up with some sort of possession or distribution or cultivating charge, that they're going to see those things in your past and go, oh, well, we can't cut this guy a break. However it is they come up with that, just don't put yourself in that situation, because you, like I said, you might not be as lucky as me to get probation, but I also have myself to thank that I'm a good person and that I don't get in trouble. I don't get involved with the police or anything like that. I just try to do the right thing. And I feel like that rewarded me in my sentencing, but other people might not be rewarded the same.
Right. Yeah, right. There's plenty of good people that have done plenty of time. It's terrifying and sad, but it's just part of the equation we're dealing with here, right? Yeah. So just I urge caution. People, just be careful. You never know who you're talking to, unless you've known the person for a long time. You just don't really know. And even then,
I'd like to.
There's some wild stories.
I'd like to add a little more.
Sure, please.
Again, if you are somebody in an activism space, do not give the leaders in the community a lot of trust or benefit of the doubt, because essentially there was me, the one flipping me the opportunity to do these interviews, and the journalist. So you can't trust the journalists. You can't trust the media. You can't trust the leaders in your community that everybody's got your back, because that's maybe where my judgment was clouded. Like, the journalists don't want to see somebody go to prison. Your leader in the community doesn't want to see you go to prison, but that's not what happened. If you do that, you might end up like me with, DEA showing up, taking all your shit, and potentially the law taking a portion of your life away from you, all because you gave trust to other people. You need to look out for yourself 100% of the time. And I'd just like to give that word of advice. Don't trust people just because they're in the same group as you. And one thing you'll realize, like, if that does happen to you, how quickly they all disappear. And it's like they want to show support, but you've got psychedelic leprosy. You are tainted, and communicating with you could go back to them. So you'll notice people are there smiling and having a good time with you and everything's good. But whenever the shit hits the fan, little to none of them are there. So keep that in mind when you're in that activism space.
Right. Absolutely. Activism is just endlessly complicated in itself, but when we're like, I think it compounds when we're in a space like this psychedelic space, where there is such intense legal pressure. So people should just, be weary, be careful, like, learn, please, from what Kole went through here. And it's one of the better ways to a better life is to learn from people's mistakes. You don't have to make all the mistakes for yourself. You save yourself a whole bunch of time and heartache. But I'm stoked that you're able to come on here, Kole, and share a bunch of this. I'm kind of curious, is there anything else you want to get into before we wrap?
Maybe something you can just simulate. Imagine having to call everybody close to you, everybody in your family, and tell them that I just got a visit from the DEA, from law enforcement, and this is happening to me. It doesn't just happen to you, it happens to everybody that's close to you. So if you're not just thinking about yourself, think about the ones closest to you to guide you in your decision making in activism space. It's important work, needs to be done, but protect yourself first.
Because if you go to prison, it's really hard to be an activist, or at least hit in the streets. So, yeah.
A lot of these journalists have no ethics. They don't care about you. They don't know what principles are. And I had to deal with that going through it. And before I had sort of withheld that information, but I just feel like saying it now.
Right on. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's I think of myself sometimes as a journalist, but I don't like this whole idea of what does it mean to be a good journalist? It's a really, I don't know, complicated thing. Yeah, there is a degree of uncaring sometimes about the people you're interacting with, but it's like for the sake of the story. I didn't go to journalism school, so people are probably going to beat me up around this, but like it's a really weird profession because you've heard the line, if it bleeds it leads, right? So it's like, the more horrible the story, the more famous you're going to get.
Yeah, I was bleeding.
Right. Absolutely. And that's why you got so much coverage. That's why so many people know your name. Yeah, it's fascinating. Have you connected with anybody else who's dealt with psychedelic legal consequences?
A few. My memory is not super sharp on it, but I was told that there was a psychedelic legal defense fund. I guess you could just look that up. I haven't visited that information in a while, but I know it exists. I've spoken to a gentleman out of Washington who was raided for psychedelics. So we had some conversations about that. In the past, year, haven't done a whole lot of reaching out or talking about it. I remember when it happened, I was telling myself, yeah, in a few years, this will just be a funny story, which it kind of is now, even though I'm on probation still and paying court fines and currently looking for a house to rent, and some property management agencies won't even give me an opportunity with a felony on my record. But these things are manageable, things that I can live with.
Yeah. Incredible. Anything else you want to get into, Kole?
Oh, yeah. Don't do what I did. Don't do anything illegal. Do everything within the law. I'm essentially sharing what has happened. Nothing about my regular life do I engage in substances. I keep all that very far away from me now, considering I don't want any more of the government in my life. So I just want to disclaim that on myself, that I'm just sharing what happened, and nothing about what I've shared am I doing at all.
Excellent. Yeah. I think that's a good disclaimer. Yeah. This is in the past, right? And,
yes.
Yeah.
But I support all the activists out there and psychedelic movements going on. Hope they continue and proceed legally for all of our benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree. We've got to stay safe here. And try our best to keep this movement healthy and moving.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, Kole Milner, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for being so vulnerable, sharing things, and just really excited to get this out, and hopefully people can keep learning from what happened.
I hope so also.
Yeah. All right. And any websites, contact info you want to shout out, or it's probably better not so?
I don't really care because people find me without even me asking them to.
Oh, wow. Okay. Cool. All right. So yeah, thanks again. We'll wrap here, and maybe in the future, if more stuff comes up that you want to share about, just maybe we can have you on again. So thanks again, Kole.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
And there you have it, everybody. Kole Milner. I hope you liked that one. I hope you learned a whole mess of things. And yeah, just try to stay safe out there, folks. That's kind of long and short of this. We might have fantasies that we're protected because we're doing what's right, but it's kind of wishful thinking in a lot of cases. So it's better to just be careful when you can. So be careful out there, everybody. Take care of yourselves and each other. And yeah, let's just keep moving this needle forward. We can make a difference. All right, everybody. Joe Moore signing off. We'll see you in the next episode. Share this with your friends, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.